Welcome to the number 4 team in this deep dive series, bringing on the Phoenix Suns. And there are two ways for championship losers to go. Number 1 is to come back better, stronger, smarter, and prove the doubters wrong. See the San Antonio Spurs when they lost, or the Cleveland Cavaliers when they lost to the Warriors. The second is to fall apart, doubt yourself, and eventually blow the team up, a la the Orlando Magic or Indiana Pacers back in the 2000s. I expect the Suns to come back with a vengeance and win the number 1 seed. DeAndre Ayton is going to continue to progress. Devin Booker is going to get even better. This team is going to ball out under third-year head coach Monty Williams, arguably one of the top 5 or top 10 best head coaches in the game. But this one had to hurt. You had the Bucks down 2-0. You were in the proverbial catbird seat and just fell off a cliff. Lost 4 in a row. Chris Paul was getting whooped by Drew Holiday night in, night out, plus whatever injuries he had and whatever injuries Devin Booker was going through. And you went from 2 games away to win the finals. Can you win the next 2 out of 5 to dropping 4 in a row and watching Run and Dunk Man hoist the Larry O'Brien trophy? On the other hand, nobody expected the Suns to be this good, this quick. It seems like only yesterday we were making Bubble Suns memes and talking about how much potential Devin Booker has. There is so much to like here. Former number 1 overall pick DeAndre Ayton still improving. Mikal Bridges showed some serious improvement and possible 20 points per game potential. Cliff Paul can apparently still play. You rediscovered campaign, and Monty Williams is legit. The future is bright in Phoenix. Now, why are the Suns coming in at 4? How I dare to put the losing team of the finals ahead of the champions in my power rankings is this, and I touched on it a bit in the Bucks deep dive, but the Suns really got away from calling plays that were working for them. They fell into the trance of let Chris Paul do his thing, and Chris really struggled with Drew Holiday's defense. Devin Booker was about 50-50 on making an incredible shot or causing an ugly turnover that led to a transition break for the Bucks. Close out Chris, though, the guy who carried you over the Lakers, the guy who whooped on the Nuggets, the guy who said nah to the Clippers, just never really showed up for the Bucks series. And Coach Monty Williams, he's so much better of a coach than Budenholzer is, except for whatever reason he just refused to run the same offense that was working for him earlier in the series and earlier in the playoffs, not exploiting Brook Lopez, not using the Spain pick and roll, not calling Iverson cuts or other plays to give Devin Booker open mid-range jumpers. He lived and died on the Giannis versus Ayton one-on-one matchup instead of building a wall. And then whenever DeAndre Ayton would get into foul trouble, the games would get out of hand. And it just felt like every single game, the Suns were the better team. They were more talented, deeper, the better coached team. Of course, they didn't have a Giannis. That guy's once in a generation. But there were so many things that they could have done better. And whenever they did need a bucket, Chris Paul or Devin Booker would make the wrong decisions, which they never did in any of the other series. From Devin Booker drifting into the paint and getting the ball stolen away by Drew Holiday instead of pulling up for the free throw line for an easy mid-range jumper, to dribbling the ball off your foot with no defenders nearby. And then they continue to let the struggling Chris Paul initiate the offense to close out the games instead of Devin Booker, and it cost them dearly. I'm sure as a Suns fan, it was so frustrating to watch. Let's talk about this upcoming season because the past is the past. Last year, they were 51-21, second in the Western Conference and 4th in the 2020 end of the regular season power rankings. An incredible record for a team that nobody was expecting. And they didn't lose a lot from their team as well in the offseason. They lost Torrey Craig, who did come up huge for them in the playoffs. He came in out of injury necessity, and he gave him some size once Dario Saric got hurt. But it seemed whenever Chris Paul would kick in the ball for a clutch 3, he'd make it, and he provided some tough defense. They also lost Javon Carter, but they brought in Landry Shamet in the trade. Brought in JaVale McGee, and they brought in Elfrid Payton. Yikes. But let's talk about this point guard position where they're going to come in at 5th with Chris Paul. Last year was probably his best chance at a title. I'm not sure how Chris Paul, point god, is going down in the history of point guards. He's the only player in NBA history to blow 4 2-0 leads in the playoffs. If he won last year's finals, he'd probably be in the discussion for top 5 point guard of all time. He can still ball with the best of them, drawing oohs and ahs from the crowd with his precision and creativity. But he's just a bit of a front runner. When he's up or messing around in the regular season, Chris is at his best. When his team needed a bucket to be the takeover man, he forgets how to play basketball. And that's why last year's playoff run was so impressive, because he was clutch. He turned into closeout Chris for 3 consecutive series. He just didn't do it on the 4th and most important one. But his fall-away mid-range game is lethal. He has such nice touch and rotation on the ball, he'll either swish it, or when he shoots it, it'll softly bounce around 5 times on the rim and go in. Obviously, he's a great passer and has even better court vision, and he is getting up there in age at age 36. That said, his game lets him play at the accelerated age. He doesn't rely much on his physicality, but smarts instead. The most physical you'll see Chris Paul get is when he shoots his mid-range. He's fallen away practically horizontal to the floor in his elbow jumper that somehow he shoots over 7-footers. He's the undisputed leader of the team. I like to say that the Phoenix Suns bought into his bullshit. A lot of people were suspecting Chris Paul's leadership because of how bad it got on his teams in Los Angeles, in Houston. And for whatever reasons, the last few years, it's really worked out with the Thunder and now with the Phoenix Suns. Now, he isn't exactly LeBron James at 36 years old. He's always been a stout little guard without the most athletics, and he is super, incredibly injury prone. But he had an A+ year last year. Despite having career lows in minutes and lower stats across the board, he played in 70 of 72 regular season games, which is incredible for him. He was in top 5 for the MVP voting, which is remarkable. And while he's not going to blow by anyone these days, and he isn't quite the nifty, quick pickpocket that he used to be on defense, he had the worst defensive rating of his career last year at 111. He's still an incredible player, and the Phoenix Suns rewarded him with a huge deal. I hope this doesn't end up like the Houston situation where he's on a near untradeable contract at age 39, but this year's going to be an interesting experiment to see how Chris Paul combats possible regression. Moving on to point guard 2, where they have Cameron Payne, and what a comeback season for this dude. Not only did he become a sensation in that he was pushed out of the NBA after being a lottery pick, he went to China and then he was given a chance by Monty Williams and turned himself into not a good role player, but their 6-man off the bench, backup primary ball handling facilitator, and he would even outplay Chris Paul for long stretches. When CP3 went out, the offense would kick it up a notch a little bit, play faster, and the Suns didn't miss a beat when he was in health and safety protocols. Cam Payne is lightning quick with the ball, and he had an unbelievable year from 3. 44%, 10th best in the entire league last season. He does still have his funky, almost sideways shot that you'd never teach your kids, but if it goes in, it goes in. He still has his beautiful floater game. He's a really good slasher, really good shooter, and a high effort defender. And he has no real glaring weaknesses. Obviously, he has a few areas of improvement, like he could use a mid-range game, but he can also work as a spot-up shooter off the ball as well as a primary facilitator. He's a good defender, he has nice foot speed, and he tries his ass off on the defensive end, which is all you can ask for from your guards. He really stepped up in the playoffs, actually boosted up his stats across the board a little bit. With Chris Paul and Devin Booker on the court, they had a 6.9 rating, and with Cam Payne and Devin Booker on the court, they had a plus 7.1 rating. I know it's missing context, but statistics back it up that Cam Payne was incredible. He had a 3.62 assist to turnover ratio, 10th in the league. He was 18 in assists per 100 possessions. He had a 28.1 assist percentage and was 20th in assists per 36. Just every single stat you look at, Raptor, BPM, net rating, the dude was a plus statistical player. He re-signed for 3 years, $19 million, and I love to see it. I love seeing guys getting their money, but I'd argue that he was so impressive last year that he's worth more like $10 to $12 million a year for the backup guard position, and he took a major pay cut to stay in Phoenix. He's a stud backup, and maybe he's the point guard of the future when Cliff Paul retires. Moving on to their point guard 3, Elfrid Payton. Yikes. I know Monty Williams saved the career of another former point guard bust in campaign, but I doubt he's going to be able to save Elfrid Payton. He just offers you no shooting. Still, 7 years into his career, 28% from 3, 68% from the free throw line. He was really bad in the playoffs and just got benched because of his offensive liabilities. He can handle the ball, and there's a lot of teams that are missing a true point guard still, a facilitating guy that Elfrid Payton would be good for. The Suns are not one of those teams. But he's a tough dude. He's just not even a great defender. He floats a bit in the passing lanes on defense, which leaves him prone to backdoor cuts. But he's a capable player minus his awful shooting. He shot at 50% at the rim, which is his only shot. He's a decent slasher, and he has had a stretch of 24 straight assists with 0 turnovers across 3 games. He is a decent distributor. He's not great. He'll miss the open man every now and then, but he is solid. I have 0 issues with him being a point guard 3, break glass in case of emergency, which is exactly what his role is right now in Phoenix. Moving on to the wing positions with this shooting guard where they're going to come in at 2nd, Devin Booker. And I know this ranking is a little high. There's a significant lack of off-ball guards in the NBA. Ahead of him is only Bradley Beal, but the other shooting guards around him in this ranking are Paul George, Donovan Mitchell, Jaylen Brown, that sort of tier of player. There isn't a Kevin Durant, LeBron James that plays the off-ball position. But Devin Booker is a stud, 25.6 points per game, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 58% true shooting, 19 win shares last year. The dude is a mid-range assassin, and as we saw in the playoffs, the mid-range shot is still the king. Now, he does have a surprisingly low percentage from 3, 34%, but I think it's more like Bradley Beal. A lot of his three-point shots are difficult, self-creation, off the dribble shots. So I'd say at the very least, He's a league average competent defender, but he takes so many difficult shots that it craters his percentage. Safe to say I'd rather have him taking a 3-point shot than a Jay Crowder. And he doesn't have that 3-point mentality of a DeMar DeRozan. The dude will take a wide open 3-pointer if he has the shot. But he has great touch around the rim. He's a nice slasher, a real tough shot maker, and he has no problem getting you 40 a night. Even when he was clearly not 100% in the finals, he still balled out. And he's still a decent on-ball defender. His off-ball defense isn't great, but most of his load is on the offense, so you can't blame him. But he really developed as a passer and a playmaker. He had a 20% assist percentage when Chris Paul arrived, which is still very good for an off-ball guard, especially playing alongside the point god. And he was 34 and 30% assist percentage pre-Chris Paul. All credit to his toughness as well. The dude got bodied by the Clippers and lived to tell the tale. Now, Booker looked really good last season, but statistically, he's not elite. He was ranked 88th in value over replacement player, 93rd in BPM, and 97th in win shares over 48. It's just so tough to grade Devin Booker. Right now, he's playing alongside Cliff Paul, so there's that. Then he had 70 points in a game, but that was in a double-digit loss. He won the 3-point competition, but he's a below-average shooter. How good is he truly in the top 20 of today's NBA? Let's move on to the small forward position with Mikal Bridges coming in at 9th. This dude has steadily been improving his scoring with 20 points per game potential, as I mentioned earlier. Right now, he's mostly a catch-and-shoot shooter. He will need to learn how to score more off the dribble. But his 13.5 points per game last year for somebody with a sub 15% usage rate was the highest anybody has had. He had a career year from 3, 42.5%, and steadily was improving from his rookie season to his sophomore season to last year. You love to see it when guys get better at shooting. He's a little older. He came into the league at 22, so he's turning 25 this season. But the dude is always available. No durability questions. He played all 82 games his rookie year, 73 games his sophomore year, and all 72 games last season. He's just invaluable to the Suns. His progression to be the third option or fourth option, depending on how you view some of the other guys on the roster, will be important to their continued and future success. He's a very good defender. Had no all defensive honors yet. He just missed out this past season, but he's a long, capable dude, 6'7", 7'1" wingspan. And he's even been showing some signs of ball handling in the preseason, which you love to see. There's also been reports that he's bulked up. He doesn't have the frame that's going to show bulk very well. He's also super young, so we'll have to see. But this year's going to need to be a step-up year for him. Bump those pick-and-roll possessions per game he had. Last year, he only had 0.4 a game, but was in the 82nd percentile in efficiency. So maybe you'd like to see Mikal Bridges holding the ball a little more. And I'll touch on this more when we get to DeAndre Ayton, but this dude is up for a contract extension. Just pay the man. He's totally worth it. A 4-year, $100 million deal for Mikal Bridges while he's still before his prime is beyond worth it. Moving on to the power forward position where they're going to come in at 21st with Cam Johnson. And now I understand Jay Crowder is going to start day one, but I fully expect Cam to take over the starting role at some point early in this season. His potential, the ceiling is too high, and he played too well for them last season to just come off the bench as a scorer for the second unit. He's 4 years younger and showed a lot in the playoffs. Crowder can fill a role perfectly, but Cam Johnson can elevate the team. He's a good shooter despite his splits last season, 35% from the 3, 56 true shooting. He spent most of his time spotted up in the corner, catching shooting threes from the point guard. So there wasn't a lot of ball handling or rhythm that he could get into. And who could forget the body bag that he put PJ Tucker in? He's just going to need to develop this year to continue to develop, get more aggressive, get to the free throw line more. He only averaged 1 free throw a game last year. And he's going to have to get better and more physical at defense. He has the build, he has the height, he's 2 inches taller than Jay Crowder at 6'8", but he lacks that grown man strength. And he's surprisingly old. He's going to be 26. This is only his second season. Basically, he was drafted at 24 years old, a Chris Duarte situation. And in the postseason and in this year's preseason, he continues to get very limited minutes and impress. Just start the man. Just play him at the 4. If shooting is your worry, I think it was down mostly because of the wrist injury that he was dealing with throughout the season last year. And let's talk about this center position with DeAndre Ayton. And I spoke on this a lot in the Denver video with Michael Porter Jr. and his contract extension, but the Suns playing hardball here with DeAndre is fucking dumb. Now, it makes sense in theory, don't get me wrong. DeAndre Ayton has not looked like a number 1 overall pick who was in the same draft as Luka Doncic, Trae Young, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Realistically, from his current production, I'd pay him similar to the Jared Allen 5-year, $100 million deal. We were promised a big man who could do it all, shoot, defend everyone, block everyone, and dunk on anybody, and what we got was a little bit less. He's still a good player, a double-double every night, but not that dominance he wanted, or the defense we expected, and nowhere near the shooting. 20% from 3 last year. Yikes. What I spoke on in the Denver video is that you either overpay or you become the Sacramento Kings. Don't get cheap on this team now when they're right on the cusp when they made it to the finals last season. He's only 23 years old. Just pay the man. But as for DeAndre Ayton, the player, I was kind of out on him in the playoffs. I'm a prove it in the regular season and the playoffs kind of guy. And to this point, I haven't seen superstar talent from Ayton. I always wave a giant red flag when we talk about a big man going top 5 overall in the draft, especially when they go number 1 overall, and especially in today's NBA. But he's not a bust, and that's a godsend. I was just told he could do it all: rim protect, rebound, score, shoot from any distance, freaky athlete. And he's lived up to most of the potential except offensively. At this point, he's really a glorified Clint Capella. His post game is pretty ugly and his 3-point is still a yikes. I don't want my former number 1 overall pick to be a guy who only catches lobs and sets screens, hence the Phoenix hesitation to give him a max deal. But he showed some signs of offense and a mid-range game, just not enough yet. Of course, as I said before, he's still super young, 23 years old. He will need to work on his consistency. He had 26 games last year where he had 8 rebounds or less, and then he had a month-long stretch where he averaged 14.2 rebounds a game. Okay, he was 8th most in the league last year with 33 double-doubles. That'll work, but he doesn't really have a post game. He had very few touches, 0.3 drives per 75 possessions, landing him in the 6th percentile, and 90% of his baskets came off 2 or fewer dribbles. And I'm not going to touch on his high field goal percentages or his quote-unquote efficiency because most of his baskets were at the rim and alley-oops with the occasional hook shot that he'd missed every other game. But he's a really good roll man. He ranked in the 80th percentile when Ayton was the roll guy. He's got butter for hands, but was really solid in the playoffs, and that never became an issue. He just gets tunnel vision a little bit. If he makes up his mind he's going to do something, be it pass to this guy or make an ugly jump hook, he'll do it regardless of what the defense does and adjust to him, frequently leading to ugly shots or unnecessary turnovers. And I really didn't like how he was a nice guy, passive in the finals. He needed motivation to play tough by Monty Williams. Then in the post-final interviews, he's super cash. He's like, oh, we'll be back, no worries, all is good, happy for the soul. And while that's good stress management, if you just came off a heartbreaking finals loss, I want some disappointment. I want some anger. And most importantly, I want some motivated players that say, fuck you, I'm going to get better next year and come back even harder. I'm worried he might be too soft. Not insultingly, not the way he plays, but when you're a big man, you have to be a bully. Demand the ball and tell anyone and everyone, you can't guard me. And you punish the other team for daring you to guard you with a pitiful defender, for daring them not to double team you. Right now, he just really plays within his role. He doesn't shoot the ball much, he rolls hard to the paint, and he rebounds. His willingness to play the role, though, was needed last season, and he should be rewarded with the contract we were talking about, not penalized. So pay the man, Phoenix. Now, I'd like to see him clean up his high highs and his low lows. He won't block a single shot for 30 games in the season, and then he'll block 7 shots in the final 3 games of the finals. Okay, but he's just dripping with potential. He's a healthy big man, something we don't see a lot from number 1 overall picks. His prime is still 5 years away. Phoenix, just pay the man. He's clearly invaluable. You saw how poorly the Suns played when he went out from foul trouble versus the Bucks. But let's talk about his backup, JaVale McGee, coming in on the mid-level exception. He's a really good pickup and the perfect center depth to hold the fort until Dario Saric comes back. If he comes back. I'm just so proud of where this dude's come from being the nightly clown on Shaqtin' a Fool to being a reliable rim protector and a good pick-and-roll man. He's also become an incredible source of positive energy on the bench. Even when he's just sitting around in his warm-up clothes, he's jumping up and down for his teammates, cheering on plays, and just being a good teammate. JaVale will try to get cute a couple times in a game, though, and do some ridiculous hook shot. That's going to be something that Coach Monty's going to have to rein in. But it's tough to grade how JaVale was last season on the Nuggets. He just didn't get a lot of playing time. He had 175 total minutes for Denver, more DNPs than times he actually got into the game. But at the very least, he'll bring some size and rim protection, which they were heavily missing versus the Bucks, especially when Ayton went out. He's the ultimate rim runner, going to be a lob machine, even more so than DeAndre Ayton is right now because he doesn't have the same height. He's a good, long defender and a legit 7-foot rim protector. Moving on to the center 3 position, and initially I had Dario Saric here, but because of the lateness of his injury and the recovery time is pretty brutal, I'm expecting him to lose the entire season. But Jalen Smith, not to be confused with Jalen Smith, former Dallas Cowboys linebacker, or Jaden Smith, son of Will Smith, or Jalen Smith, linebacker for West Virginia. Jalen Smith is another one of those undersized centers from last year's draft, 6'9". Some sites list him at 6'10", whatever. He didn't get much run last season, only had 156 minutes all of last year, 5.8 minutes a game for 27 games. In that totality, he made 4 threes, 5 free throws, 5 blocks, 4 assists, and 1 steal. Just not an impressive season. He was incredibly underwhelming and the Suns fans are out on him. But let's talk about the good. He has a very clean jump shot. It looks good. The mechanics are solid. He's a good rebounder. He's a high effort, good energy guy on the floor. He supposedly has good ball handling. I've yet to see it. And he led the Suns Summer League in scoring with 14 points a game, 12 rebounds, but was only 27% from the three. The bad. Last season and the few minutes he got, he was really bad. He's super skinny and struggles with contact. Only a 36% field goal percentage in the Summer League when big men normally shoot in the 60s. He doesn't have great post defense even though he's a center. He's a tweener in age, super young at 21 years old while the Suns are in win now mode. He needs time to develop while Chris Paul's going to retire soon. The Suns aren't in the business of developing a guy who may have potential 8 years down the road. The other bad, he's another tweener big man. Is he a 4? Is he a 5? He has the traits to run either. Unfortunately, instead of playing him at his natural 5, the Suns are trying to play him as a wing player. He's a really bad perimeter defender because he's a center. I'm so disappointed in the Suns organization more and more as we talk about the roster. You look at the roster and they go, oh, we need power forward depth. So instead of going out and finding somebody who's a natural power forward and patiently developing this guy who's a top 10 talent according to their draft pick selection, they try to turn him into a player that he isn't and then get disappointed when he underperforms as a wing. I understand the old way thinking that 2 bigs on the court is good, but this is the new efficient NBA. There's 1 point guard, 1 big, and 3 wings to space the floor. Now, there are some rumors that they're going to trade for Thad Young. I think Jalen Smith and Dario Saric are going to get packaged together to match salaries and throw on some second-round picks or whatever. I mean, I guess if that's what you want to do. I don't think I'm a huge fan of that trade. But let's talk about the bench, where they're going to come in at 15th. Jay Crowder, probably the day one starter, as I mentioned, on this team. He's a really good 5th option on a championship team. He shot incredible from 3 last year, had one of his best years at 39%. He's just super inconsistent. You never know if he's going to be 5 of 7 or 0 for 6, and he doesn't stop jacking those threes up. But he's money on that step through elbow 3-point shot. He's a good, strong defender still, even in his 31-year age. He's a big dude, a great interior post defender. His issue offensively is that he has the role of stretching the floor. That's it. Being the streaky shooter that he is, if his shot falls, you go, oh my God, Jay Crowder is an incredible player. When it's not, he still takes the same number of shots and goes over and looks like a bum. There's very little middle ground for him, and he can't really impact the game otherwise or help his teammates by making other plays. He lives by the 3, he dies by the 3. And overall, he's just not a very good player. He's a bit of a drama queen. He flails a lot. I won't call it flopping, but that move that James Harden does where when he gets some sort of contact, he'll snap his head back at the slightest bit of contact that comes his way. And he also makes some really ugly passes and struggles with handling the ball. He struggles with defending guards. You know who Jay Crowder is. He has a role and he fills it. Moving on to their trade piece for Javon Carter, Landry Shamet, who turned himself into a sharp shooter. He's in the JJ Redick mold right now. He can make the occasional driving kick if needed, but he's a really nice pickup for the Suns. Javon Carter wasn't giving you anything in the postseason. He's a good player. I'm not sure why the Nets gave him away other than their series lacking point guard room where Mike James was running with the second unit. But Landry Shamet struggles defensively. He makes up for that by being a career 39.7% 3-point shooter. As for Abdel Nader, he's still in the league. He's a good shooter as well, shot 42% from the 3 last year. Is a tall enough wing at 6'5" with a 7'1" wingspan, just tall, athletic wing depth. Also here is Frank Kaminsky, and it's tough to say, but he completely disappointed when Dario Saric went out in the finals. You were hoping that he would slide right in as a stretch 5 and fill his role, but he didn't give you anything off the bench. At this point, he's just a tall dude who can shoot, but he doesn't even shoot that well. Shot 36.5% last year, still below the league average, and that's like his only strength other than he's tall. As for Dario Saric, I mentioned he wasn't coming back, but he was a really decent shooter from 3, 35%, but shot at enough volume to make you come out and defend him when he shoots the 3. He's also a much better defender than I expected. He guarded Zubac, Brook Lopez, even Giannis fairly well, despite the fact that he's only 6'9", 6'10". I tease Dario so much because when he has the ball, he's a complete klutz, but he's a really solid role player for the Suns team, and his loss was huge in their finals matchup. He's not a great defender on the perimeter, and he has poor foot speed and verticality, but who would have guessed Dario was so important to this Suns second unit? His injury is why I always say you need 1.5 centers. When the backup was Frank Kaminsky, he could not cut it, and the Bucks bullied the small ball unit when Ayton went off the court. Torn ACLs are going to be about 9 to 12 months. This one occurred about as late as it possibly could have into the finals in a late playoff season, so it's unknown if he's going to return at all this year. I'm predicting no, and he may have played his last game as a Phoenix Sun. Moving on to Chason Randall on the exhibition contract. Wow, this guy's still in the league too. He's an undersized combo guard who can't shoot. He can't really facilitate. I don't really know what he offers you. He's supposed to be a scorer, but then all he can do is slash. So good for you, I guess. Chandler Hutchinson is on the two-way, and I couldn't believe it because he was a major bench piece out there in Washington, and nobody offered him a contract or a veteran's minimum. Yikes, he went from playing 15 to 20 minutes a night last season, and now he's going to be starring on the G League team. But he's a big dude, 6'6", 210 pounds, an athlete with some slashing ability, just a really undersized 4. Moving on to the coaching culture ranking, where they're going to come in at 18th. For the head coach, I'm in. I'm a huge buyer of Monty Williams stock. The offensive execution, the culture change of the formerly clowned franchise known as the Phoenix Suns to fighting in the NBA Finals, how he motivated DeAndre Ayton to play tough. He always seems to say the right thing, and his guys believe in him. The GM, James Jones, has done a great job drafting in the last few seasons and bringing over Chris Paul. The owner, Robert Sarver, I'm so out on. He's scared so many players away and coaches too, most notably ISO Joe, Raja Bell, Steve Kerr, and I'm just not in the penny pinching franchise business who plays hardball with your former number 1 overall pick DeAndre Ayton. A frugal owner who's playing stingy with his money because he doesn't want to go into the luxury tax? Go fuck yourself. You're not going to get a chip in today's NBA unless you go over the cap and pay your players. Look at what the Nuggets quote unquote frugal ownership did. It was wild because they gave CP3 that ridiculous contract extension, but they're not going to give it to their number 1 overall pick in a few years ago. Either pay up or sell the team. I'm rapidly losing hope on this team since they're refusing to pay both Mikal Bridges and DeAndre Ayton right now. It feels a lot like the New York Knicks situation. You have a head coach you believe in, a GM who's been doing good things of late, and an owner that's a fucking douche that will do their best to ruin everything. Moving on to their season projections, where they're projected to win 51.5 games, 14-1 championship odds, and I'm more basing this prediction off their playoff run, but I think the Suns are going to be back this season. I think they're going to win the number 1 seed. I don't expect the Lakers to win it. I don't expect the Golden State Warriors to win it. Age, load management, injuries, they're all going to say, oh, the regular season isn't that important to us. So either the Suns or the Nuggets are my picks to win the number 1 seed. And while I don't think they're going to be better than the Los Angeles Lakers or Golden State Warriors overall, I think they're out to prove everybody wrong. They had the 6th best defense last season, the 3rd highest total net rating at plus 5.9. They have incredible team chemistry. It's just all about what can Chris Paul do for you. Is he going to be closeout Chris this season, or is he going to be Cliff from State Farm? But that's going to do it for this Phoenix Suns team coming in at 4th. Let me know what you think, what you agree with, what you disagree with, and I'll catch you in the next one where we unveil team number 3.